Hello, and welcome back to France Made Simple, the podcast where I demystify and debunk life in France and hopefully prevent you lot from making all of the mistakes that I've made over the last 23 years. Now, living here is a wonderful adventure and it's something that a lot of people think about doing, want to do, but there's a lot of pitfalls along the way. And one of the most basic ones, can be finding the right type of property. So, on that note, I'm delighted to tell you that this morning I'm joined by Paul, who is going to tell us all about what he does to help people along the way in their journey to living in France. So, hello, Paul. Thanks for joining us.
Hi there.
Hi. So, maybe the best way to kick this off would be for you to introduce yourself and explain how you came to be here and how you became to be doing what you do.
Okay, yeah, sure. It's a bit of a long story, and like a lot of things, life tends to get in the way and throws up complications that you didn't envisage, and it's all about how you come across those and navigate life's ever-changing river, so to speak. So I've been coming to France for a very, very long time, all my life, but my wife's parents have had a holiday home in the Dordogne since the early 70s. So I've been coming down with her since we first got together, sort of 15, 20 years ago. And when we started a family, my wife's a chef. And when we started a family, we quickly realized, or my wife quickly realized, that going back to work as a chef with a small child was really difficult. And the money that she was going to take home back in the UK after childcare was so small, it was sort of insignificant and minimal. So she gave up her work as a chef and set up her own catering business in the UK. But in the UK, there are many, many caterers, which means obviously not only competition for work is high, but it means that the prices are driven down. So there's not a huge amount of money to be made as a single one-man band very easily. When my eldest was quite small, we were still coming down here every summer, and my wife would come down at the beginning of the summer and stay till the end, and I'd sort of shoehorn that, bookend that, pick her up, drive her down and pick her up. Then the first or second summer with my eldest, Jack, she started to work down here, and she picked up more work in the sort of 8 to 10 weeks that she was down in the southwest of France than she had done in the previous sort of 12 to 24 months back from the UK. So that sort of put the kernel in our brains that maybe we could relocate. So we did, and what we did was we stayed in my in-laws' place for, it was meant to be a year, but I'll get to that in a second, to see whether we liked it down here when the sun wasn't shining and pool was closed and the local pizzeria was also shut, sort of thing. So we didn't want to sell up and come down here and then cut our ties and realize that we had no route back when we didn't like it in the autumn and the winter, which we have seen plenty of people do, which
Yeah.
is a pitfall that I would recommend people not to do. Don't cut off the ties straight away without you experiencing life here 24/7, 12 months a year. So we did that, and I was commuting on a weekly basis. I was a management consultant back in the UK. So I would catch a flight at the beginning of the week to go back to the UK, and flight at the end of the week come back here. And bizarrely and perhaps perversely, many people in the UK maybe can understand this, my 2 flights a week were cheaper than my rail commute from near Cambridge into London. Not just by a little bit either, by a considerable amount, which is bizarre, but there you go. So I did that for about a year. And then 2 things happened. Firstly, my wife was pregnant with our 3rd child, and I realized living in rural France, I needed to be around if she went into labor. So the idea was I was going to take a sabbatical for about a year. The baby was due at the end of 2019, so I was going to take a sabbatical. So I was here for the birth, and then be daddy daycare during the summer during my wife's busy season, and then the next year 2020, and then when that died down, I'd I'd go back to work sort of at the end of 2020, beginning of 2021. That was the idea. Then, of course, COVID hit. And luckily, I'd already taken said sabbatical. So I was here. But what that did for me and my family unit, as it did for a lot of people globally, is it made us totally reassess our way of life. And we realized one of the main justifications for me doing that commute was that when we were in the UK anyway, my commute meant that I was up and out the door before the kids were awake, and I was home quite often when they were asleep. So I really only saw them on the weekend anyway. So one of our justifications was, well, what difference is it going to make to our family dynamic? I don't see them during the week anyway. So, but COVID made us realize just because that was the way doesn't mean that that is the best way. And we realized that me being around a lot more was better and more beneficial for the children and their upbringing. So that sabbatical became permanent. I decided to end my career in London and start afresh in France. Now that obviously posed questions about what it is that I could do. And although my French is pretty good, I wouldn't say I'm fluent. So I wasn't able to sort of transition into a career that I had in London in France. Plus also being in rural France, there isn't much call for management consultants in rural Dordogne.
I think that's I think that's a very interesting point, actually, that it struck me that it was very interesting that your wife was able to move here and pick up more work than she'd had in the UK. And that's so often not the case for people, and work is a big problem and a big issue. So I guess that is kind of probably comes back to the fact that France is such a food-centered country. There's always going to be a demand for people that can, chef and cook and produce food. But equally, very interesting that although your French is okay, you don't have that, you weren't able to become a French management consultant kind of thing, which I think, is another thing that people are often not aware of, that they can't necessarily continue doing what they have been doing. So they need to think out of the box. Yeah, I think I might have lost you there for a second.
Yeah, you're back.
All right. Well, it should be okay. So let's carry on.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good point. I mean, from my wife's perspective, most of her work, I would say 80, 90% of her work is with the English speaking community, be that tourists, or be that people that are sort of semi or permanently located here. Now, you can draw what you want from that, but I would probably say that comes down to the fact that the French are trying not to be rude here, but a little bit snobby about their food. So the idea of an English woman catering for them is a little bit alien. To be fair, anyone catering for them is a little bit alien. Doesn't really matter what nationality. So she does a lot of weddings. The majority of her work is catering for weddings, which is normally people that have rented a big property or a chateau, and they're getting married down here. And my wife provides the food. That's the vast majority of what she does. When it comes to me, I mean, I could have easily taken a crash course and got my French up to a standard where I could have gone into an office job in, say, in Bordeaux or Toulouse again. But then that posed the question. I'm about 2 hours from both of those. I'm kind of in the middle. So I'd either have to stay in Bordeaux or Toulouse or wherever. So we're back to square one of what the commute was for me anyway. And the family dynamic would have changed with me not being there. So my French aside, that kind of got put to one side, because we realized that wouldn't really change anything. The idea was that I wanted to be around, or we wanted me to be around more. So I started to think about what kind of transferable skills I had from being a management consultant, and I quickly landed on real estate, both very centric around the client, and being sort of interpersonal, and managing your diary yourself. So I started to look into that, and I had various conversations with various agencies, and a chance meeting with an owner of a Christie's international real estate affiliate, made me have a discussion with him, and I started working with that agency, which I did in the sometime in 2020, sort of middle of 2020, and I did that for about just over 5 years. I was working with Christie's, and I enjoyed it greatly. Mainly because it was very similar to what I did back in the UK. It was all about my relationship with people, which I think I'm pretty good at, and I enjoyed that. And it was also with a view to delivering something for them, something tangible. Quite often with management consultancy, what I delivered wasn't tangible, and my advice sometimes wasn't taken when I walked away. But at least if I sold a property, I knew that I'd given someone something tangible that they could enjoy and take the benefits from for a very long time. So that was good as well. And working at the high end of real estate, I also got the pleasure of looking around some delightful properties. That was my job,
I
to go and look
bet.
at chateaus and things like that, which was lovely.
Mm.
Now the fundamental um, of the transaction of buying a property in France is exactly the same as it is in the UK or anywhere else globally. You're providing a service, and ultimately, as a buyer, you are giving someone money to buy something bricks and mortar that you're walking away from. However, that journey, that transactional journey from A to B, is very, very different in France. And
Yeah.
a lot of people, particularly some French people as well, indeed, get very lost in the process because, like a lot of things in France, it's not simple. They
No.
love to overcomplicate things in France because at the end of the day, it's a socialist country, and that creates jobs. The more bureaucracy there is, the more people have to tick boxes, etc., in an office. Being slightly cynical there, but there you go. And the 5 years that I had working with Christie's, I saw many, many people, particularly after COVID, coming to France with this romantic dream of owning a property here, be that a permanent relocation, retirement, or a holiday home in a beautiful part of France, be that near vines or near the beach or whatever. And I saw so many people, particularly North Americans, actually come here with that dream and leave with their tail between their legs, getting back on the plane to go home thinking, my dream is dead. I'm never going to be able to realize it because I simply do not understand. I cannot navigate this process. It's too complicated. I give up. And I saw that happen a lot. And it's quite
Right.
disheartening to see people arrive so
Mm.
confident, so full of joy, and leave sort of dejected and a little bit
Yeah.
downhearted, and at the very least sort of reassess what they want to do.
Hmm.
Many people were coming here with a view of, I'm going to come here for a week and I'm going to leave having bought a property,
Yep.
and then realize it wasn't going to happen in that week, and perhaps their journey was going to take a few years rather than just a few weeks.
Mm.
Um, so I not only did I start to see that, but I also the the model of the way things work real estate wise in France is quite different to the UK and indeed the States or North America. So the vast majority of agents that you will encounter as a purchaser, they're working on a commission only basis. So
Yep.
if they don't make a sale, they don't make any money. That's quite standard.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that means that it kind of fosters and encourages nefarious behavior, because if someone hasn't made a sale for 18 months and they suddenly put a client in front of them that they know is going to buy, they're going to do whatever they can to get that sale across the line. That doesn't
Absolutely.
mean that every single agent is like that, because there are many, many good agents out there, but it does mean that the way the model works, you've got to be very
Mm.
careful as a purchaser,
Yep.
um, who you trust and how you trust them. Um, and I didn't like that. I didn't like the way the model was set up. My whole ethos is about honesty and collaboration, and sometimes as an agent working with an agency on a commission only basis, that kind of got in the way.
Hmm.
Um, uh, you, as an agent, you'll be dealing with not only other agents from other agencies that are your competitors, and that's normal. But you've also got, as you're self-employed, you've got other agents working under the same umbrella. They're sometimes are not exactly collaborative and working in a team environment. They want to make the sale themselves rather than one of their colleagues make the sale. So that's another thing I didn't like. Um, um, but working with Christie's, I dealt a lot with North American clients, and it's even more alien to the North Americans than it is to Brits, the real estate model here. So they
Yep.
simply could not get their head around the fact that the agent that they were dealing with was both buying and selling the property that they were looking at. So the real estate agents, as they do in the UK, they work both sides of the transaction. So you're working on behalf of the buyer, but you're also working on behalf of the seller.
Yep.
So it's the agent's responsibility to go out and mandate the properties, but it's also the responsibility to find the clients to buy them. Now, if you take a step back from that, I know as Brits, that's what we are used to. And indeed in France, that's normal. But if you take a step back from that, that seems a bit alien. That seems like you cannot be truly impartial. And you've got having a foot in both sides of the camp means that you can't really truly be honest with either the buyer or the seller. And that's also something that went against my ethos. So what I have done is I have set up on my own as a property finder. So I work exclusively for purchasers. So either I will be sharing the commission with the selling agent, or I will be paid an external separate fee by the purchaser to find them a property. And that way, from my perspective, I can be truly impartial. I can be truly honest. I can collaborate. I can genuinely go out there and work only for one side of the transaction. And I can make sure that property that I find said client is exactly what they're looking for, rather than just the few properties that I have in my portfolio as a
That
real
you
estate
try
agent
to,
working.
yeah, exactly. That you try to talk them into believing will be the right one for them. So you work from the
Exactly.
client's brief. In other words, they give you a brief, they tell
Exactly.
you exactly what they're looking for, and you go and find it. So how do you,
Precisely.
yeah, yeah, sorry, how do you go about finding properties for a client?
So the sort of the hotspots real estate wise in France are Paris, the Alps, the Côte d'Azur, and a little bit around sort of the southwest where I'm based, sort of around the vineyards near Saint-Emilion and that kind of thing, where the chateaus are. Those are the main hotspots. So generally, those are the areas that when I have clients I've had conversations with, those are the areas that they're looking at. That doesn't mean that that's the only place in France that people are interested in. I mean, it really depends on what the client is looking for. I've had conversations with American clients, and God love them. They don't necessarily always appreciate the size of France. So, something that I always used to say to my British clients is, France is got the same population, give or take, to the UK, about 60, 65 million people. But it's 4 to 5 times the size of the UK. So that means, firstly, there's a lot more properties than there are people looking for them. So you get a lot more bang for your buck in terms of bricks and mortar. But also there's a lot more space. So things that particularly I found difficult in the UK to deal with, like the amount of cars on the road, the amount of people there are in Waitrose when you go and get your weekly bottle of gin or whatever. That just simply isn't the case in France.
Yeah.
I mean, I can take my kids to school and quite often only pass 1 or 2 cars on a 15-minute journey. That's normal. So there are huge benefits from that perspective as well. So if that's what you're looking for, and you're not necessarily just looking for the sun or for the vines or for the sand or for the snow in the Alps or the Pyrenees, there are huge possibilities to get more for your money. So Brittany is an excellent example. And generally, the further away you go from those hotspots, the more you get for your money. But you need to be aware. I have a client at the moment that's looking between the Bordeaux and Toulouse region. But the further away you go from Bordeaux, the further away you go from Toulouse, the more you're going to get for your money. So you might find a 10-bed property for the same money that you might find a 5-bed property only 10 minutes outside of Bordeaux, for example.
Yeah.
But then you've got to take into the flip side of the plus the benefits of that situation are that if you do go very rural, public transport doesn't really exist in rural France. So
Okay.
you're going to need to drive. So if you really like the look of a property, but it's an hour and a half from a major sort of urbanization, um, that's sort of the downside that you have to take into account. It's further away from uh, the big towns that it are normally very easy to access in the UK. That being said, the smaller towns, I mean, I live about an hour and a half, 2 hours from Bordeaux, but that doesn't mean I have to go to Bordeaux to do anything. The smaller towns near me, I've got sort of half a dozen within about 15, 20 minutes that provide virtually everything you can ever want. And then a bit further afield, a couple of larger ones that are about half an hour away. So I rarely need to go into Bordeaux for anything. It's quite nice sometimes to go into larger cities to experience that. But it's also quite nice not to have it on your doorstep, that it is a bit of a drive away.
Yeah.
I very
Yeah.
much enjoy that. And I know most of my clients, that's what they're looking for as well, a bit of the peace and quiet. But particularly the further away one is. So I live close to Bergerac, for example, which has an international airport with very strong links to the UK. So for the
Mm,
UK population and expats, is brilliant down here. But if you live in, say, San Francisco for the majority of the year, there are only two airports in the whole of France that offer direct flights to the US. Um, so the journey to get here, if you're not near Paris or Nice, which are the only two that have direct flights, is a lot
right.
more convoluted. Unless you're very wealthy and you're lucky enough to have a private jet or access to a private jet, you've got to take that into consideration. You're going to need to either change in London or Paris or Frankfurt, one of the big European hubs, to get where you want to go. And even if you do that, for example, if you've got a property near where I am and you take a hub from, say, Paris to Bordeaux, you've still probably got another hour and a half, 2 hours to get to your property once you've got
Mm,
to the smaller hub. So
yeah,
things like that
absolutely.
really need to be taken into consideration when you're looking for a property. Um, so that's the first protocol with the property is sort of the logistics of getting here and the ease of getting
Mm,
here. But then you've got to sort of navigate the convoluted system that is French real estate, which can be overbearing and difficult to understand. I mean, the way the model works is because one is dealing with multiple agents within agencies. It's quite easy nowadays to click on a couple of links on websites, and you might think, oh, I've only clicked two agencies' websites, therefore I'm only dealing with two agencies. If you clicked on
yeah.
5 properties within each agency, you're quite likely dealing with 5 different agents within
Yeah.
that one agency. So if you've clicked on 2 agencies with 5 agents within each agency, you're suddenly having 10 conversations,
Yeah.
essentially about the same thing. So sort of when you're talking about the sheer volume of conversations, that quite often gets people depressed because they get lost about which property they're seeing, what property they're talking about, which agent am I speaking to now, where is this based, that type of thing.
Yeah.
What I do is I streamline that, I simplify that process, so I'm the single point of contact. So I deal with all that noise on behalf of my clients. So they only have one conversation, and that's with me, and I go away and do all of those conversations, and do the visits. And the idea being that when the client arrives, I've already got a really good idea, having visited properties for them and on behalf of them, taken my own photos, my own videos, had conversations with them about what I think personally, because it's very easy to look at a property online, look at the photos and think it looks fine, it looks wonderful, then get there and realize actually the central heating doesn't work. There's no double glazing. I can't live here outside of the summer months, or the pool
Yeah.
needs redoing, or the roof is falling in, or all
Oh,
those
that,
type of things that obviously the agent that's advertising it is not going to put on the website, but
no,
being
absolutely
impartial, I
not.
can I can see that for them.
Yeah. So no, I can excuse me, I can absolutely see the service that you provide and the benefits that provides. And it's something that I hear time and time again, especially from North Americans. You know, they're just daunted by the way the system works here. They're daunted by the whole process and the procedure, and it's alien, it's different. I mean, nothing is insurmountable in France. You just have to know how things work and then wriggle around them accordingly, kind of thing. But I think that the service you provide is something that an awful lot of people are looking for. So that brings me on to my next question. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
My website has all of my contact details. It's Luxury Buyers Agent France. Either email or phone. Most of my clients are based in North America at the moment, which means that I have to deal with sort of the time difference. So I quite often arrange WhatsApp calls. Firstly, because it uses the internet, and one of the pitfalls that I'm sure you're familiar with as well in my part of the world anyway is mobile reception is pretty poor. So most of my communications are done over the internet by either by video call, WhatsApp call, or email. So I'm available on all of those mediums. I also that my model is as flexible as sort of the bespoke situation for each individual client. So if a client only wants a conversation to sort of handhold them through a particular process, I'm happy to help them with that as well on sort of a day rate consulting advisory basis. But if indeed they're looking for full blown property finding services where I go and do absolutely everything for them, then I can do that as well. But realistically and generally, all I'm trying to do is simplify the process for people that I don't want to see sort of put their dream in the trash can, as the Americans would say.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you so much for that, Paul. I will drop all of your details and the link to the website in the show notes so that people can get in touch. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. I'm sure it would be lovely to have you back at a later date. I'd love to talk more about properties, one of my favourite subjects after food and properties. You know, a lot of the attraction of France, I think, for lots of people, whether they're British or American buyers or even French. But yeah, thank you very much for joining us.
Not a problem. Lovely to speak as always.
All right. Thank you all very much for listening. And thank you, as always, to our sponsors, Fab French Insurance. And I will see you next time. Thank you and bye bye.